Hello, and thank you very much for joining us for today's Talent Toolbox event on crafting processes and workflows to level up your business. My name is Will Simpson, and I'm an event manager here at Upwork, and I'm also a graphic design freelancer on the Upwork platform. I've had the awesome opportunity to interview many highly successful independent professionals on Upwork over the past 3 years. And I listened to our community members on what hurdles they're facing in their own journeys on Upwork. And it's with these things in mind that I aim to put together various talent toolbox events to really help fill in some of the gaps and address common hurdles that we all face as independent professionals. Today, we're going to be focused on crafting consistent and professional workflows to ensure our projects run smoothly, our clients are impressed, and we have the ability to scale up our businesses to handle increased workloads without sacrificing quality. I know that we have a wide range of skill levels attending this event, and it's my hope that this content is an important reminder for some and some fresh new ideas for others still finding their way in the freelancing world. And as we discuss these topics and various approaches, please feel free to contribute your learnings and ask any questions in the chat Q&A. Hopefully it'll be unlocked here in a minute. My goal is to learn here together. Also, please note that the methods and techniques that we're going to be discussing today are suggestions based upon established best practices, as well as practical experience gathered from my own experience and the experience of the many successful professionals I've interviewed in our community events programs. Ultimately, however, you are responsible for deciding what approaches work best for you and your business. All right, let's dive in. Let's start with taking a look at onboarding workflows. So having an established client onboarding process and workflow is a critical and oftentimes overlooked step. I know when I was first starting out, I treated each project as a completely unique experience, and I didn't really have an organized approach to getting projects off the ground. As I'm sure others here have experienced, this leaves a dangerous amount of room for human error and missed client expectations. So before I get into the how-to on thoughtful onboarding, I wanted to touch on some key points of why this is such a crucial step to have lined out properly. First and foremost, scalability. Whether that looks like you handling more projects on your own, or if it's expanding your business and with support staff, or perhaps going the agency route with multiple employees working with you, the more you have your processes outlined in an easily repeatable form, the easier you'll be able to hand off the various tasks to your teammates, or at the very least, ensure that you aren't dropping the ball with your existing list of clients. Next up is consistency. Now, I know when we are new to freelancing, there is a whole lot of trial and error as we work to discover what processes and logic serve us and which are superfluous. I've found that the more consistent you are with these efforts, the easier it is to analyze what steps contribute and which steps are slowing you down, thereby enabling you to evolve your workflows in a logical and digestible manner. For those that have joined some of my previous events, this is similar to the approach on proposals doing A/B testing. It's hard to improve your process when it's sort of random each time. But if you take the time to have sort of a repeatable sort of framework and process, you can really determine in an analytical manner how to improve quite quickly. And client sentiment. This one is huge. Clients seek to get a gauge of what it's like working with you from the very beginning, from your proposal all the way through to delivery of the final product. They're sort of gauging who you are and what you're about. Being good at the actual work you do is a part of the ingredients for success. As an independent professional, the client needs to buy into you as well as your work. So if your approach is easy for them to follow, expectations are clearly set, and communication channels and timelines are established, the client will typically feel quite positive and confident that you have this project entirely in hand and they're working with a real professional. On the flip side, it's quite easy to destroy that trust relationship if you appear disorganized or chaotic and you're bouncing around in the process. And then last but not least here, error reduction. This one's pretty self-explanatory and may sound silly and basic, but it's an easy thing to overlook. Writing down your steps, client responses to scoping questions and such drastically reduces the amount of errors you're going to make, whether this is in misaligned deliverable expectations or in missed deadlines or just nuanced details of the project. Ensuring your workflow is dialed in usually includes some steps with slight overlaps to ensure important details are established and confirmed up front. The first step to creating a client onboarding workflow is to just sit down and take the time to fully outline your process, all the moving pieces involved. It doesn't have to start off as a clean linear outline at first. It can, it can just be, words on paper, a stream of consciousness sort of thing. But get it all down and come back to it later for refinement. But consider the typical steps you encounter each time you start a project with a client. So I typically start off by focusing on establishing the scope of a project. Now we're going to dive deeper into this specific topic in the next segment. So I'm not going to go into too much detail on this right now, but from a high level, you're looking to establish what is a client looking for in its entirety, the entire scope of the project, all the little pieces that may not have been mentioned. You're looking to establish deliverable timelines. You're looking to establish the review process, how long revisions will take back. Once you provide that draft, how long will the client take to provide their notes and feedback on adjustment? How long will you take to flip that back? All of these steps are critical. And then you want to make sure you're outlining your asset delivery specifications. I mentioned that I work in graphic design, so I need to make sure are these the file types that people need. We'll get more into this detail in just a little bit here. Now, do you work with a few different types of clients and projects? I know I do. What are the variations in those steps and those types of clients? For me, I typically work on presentation decks and branding projects in the graphic design space. These are my two primary niches. And the steps and considerations for a branding project have significant differences from my deck creation projects. So what is your version of this? Do you know your typical client and project profiles? If not, this is a worthwhile thing to do. Take time to look at this. I find that I either end up working with a department manager or an owner of a company in small to mid-sized B2B sort of companies. And this is an important item to note when it comes to knowing who else needs to be involved in your project reviews and approvals. Now, while your process outline is likely going to be quite front end heavy, it's critical to consider your project closeout steps as well. Are you delivering your assets in a polished and professional manner, or are you just throwing out a series of unlabeled attachments with no context? It brings to mind, and I'm sure I'm not the only one who's done this before. It's logo, final file, V2 underscore final. each time you think it's the last one, you keep slapping on a new final or a version number. No judgment here. I've definitely been guilty of this. But these little details make a big perception change in the client's experience. They want a nice polished bow on top sort of presentation. Let's see here. All right. Still working on the chat there. Sorry, just looking at an update. Hopefully we get that kicked back on. Are you back to the closing here? Are you able to identify any upsell or ongoing work opportunities before closing your projects? I know that the majority of my small projects ended up turning into large ongoing projects just due to the nature of the business and my closeout procedures being dialed in. So you're leaving dollars on the table if you don't have a proper closeout process. Are you confirming that the client has received everything that they need and expected? Are they happy with the work? It's a very good idea to establish this before asking for the feedback. So for those that have not joined one of my previous events, I usually typically do a 3-prong close. I say, okay, we've done the logo project. Are there any other projects I can help you with at this time? The upsell, seeing other opportunities. No? Okay. Have I delivered everything that you're looking for? Are you happy you've got the file formats? You feel comfortable? Yes. Great. That's when you have the call to action for leaving feedback. Many clients are not aware of the immense value a positive review has for a freelancer on our ability to secure additional work. And anyone here can vouch for this, whether you're working to get those first few client feedback ratings, or if you've cracked that case and you're cruising along with a nice 5-star rating. These positive client reviews are huge components to success in capturing consistent work on Upwork. I can see the Q&A is unlocked there. Very good. Hopefully the chat will too. So once the entirety of your process has been lined out in detail, it's time to pare this information down into a reusable template, which you can use for each client. I've done this typically in something like Google Documents, where I just clone the checklist document and rename it for each new client. Just be mindful of any client information sensitivity and be sure to use tools which meet or exceed these requirements. It's not the case with all clients, but if you're working with people like in cybersecurity or in a sensitive space, be mindful and ask. Ask what their requirements and minimum needs are for that. And for those that are asking, this webinar is indeed being recorded and will be available in the coming days, same place you registered. All right. So when making the checklist, it ensures that I know exactly where I stand in each various stage of a project with my client, and I can pick right up where I left off, and I'm following up with the client on any outstanding items or asset gathering phases. This makes juggling multiple client projects at one time much more successful, and you come across far more polished. It's also worth considering, are you going to make a checklist a client-facing document, or is this only going to be for your own internal reference? I've used both ways, no specific preference, but I will say that having a timeline and client visible game plan is a good way to let your clients see and know that you're on track and everything's on schedule. So I would lean towards having one that you can share with a client, if possible. It's not always possible due to the level of details that you're writing down internally. All right, I put together a few examples of what these checklists could look like. And just to say, they don't have to be fancy or works of art, but there's a few things you want to make sure and keep in mind. You want to keep it simple. You don't want to be wasting all of your day filling out all these forms. You need it to be to the point, getting to the meat of the issue quickly. You want to make it repeatable, applicable to the various client projects you may encounter. And be mindful, as I mentioned, of any security or privacy concerns your clients may have. Not all programs secure data the same way. And be sure to revise the checklist as your business grows. There are a wealth of example onboarding checklists available online for free, and you don't need to fully reinvent the wheel to get this done. So whatever category you may be working in, you can go online and just Google, freelance onboarding checklist for web developer, something like that. But that'll help give you some threads to pull on, as crowdsourcing information is very beneficial. Sorry, just taking a quick peek in the Q&A here since our chat is offline. Good questions in there. I'm going to save some of these for the Q&A at the end there, but I'm loving those good questions in there. Keep them coming. So let's take a look at some onboarding best practices. So researching the client and showing up to your interview or subsequent exploration calls with a general understanding of your client, their positioning, their objectives, their concerns, etc. It's a really effective way to signal to your client that they are making the right hire. You are plugged in, you are paying attention, and you're putting together the pieces without needing to be spoon-fed every detail. Now, I understand this is not always a straightforward process. I wouldn't say every client lists their company name in the job posting. It's not always the case. But there are many ways to familiarize yourself with a client's situation to varying degrees based upon the information you do have available to you. So get examples and reference materials whenever possible too. This is a huge one. I'm sure many folks here can attest to the observation that there is oftentimes a significant gap between what the client asked for and what was described what they asked for, what was described in the post, and what they're actually intending to receive or accomplish. Now, this is not meant to be a dig at clients in any way, more so just an observation that oftentimes clients are hiring in a space that they do not have experience or expertise in. They may not know how to describe the specific tool they want you to code, the GIF they want you to animate, or the tone and style of that copyright content they're looking to get created. That's why they're on the platform looking for the professional, you. It falls on us as a professional handling the projects to probe for this information. And I found that one of the most successful ways to get in alignment with my clients' objectives is for them to provide examples. Sometimes this is in the form of showing me competitors that they're looking to emulate or improve upon. Sometimes this is done in examples of industry trends they're looking to avoid or break free from. Examples of what clients don't want are sometimes even more useful than what they do want. So be asking these questions. And if they don't have examples, do a bit of homework and provide your own example and say, is this what you're looking for? Does it want to be this shade of blue? Do you want these types of analytics? Whatever the case may be. I find that the more you ask a client to connect 2 points and intuit the details, the more chance for miscommunication you're going to have. So I'd like to go back and take a deep dive into the specific onboarding step of identifying a project scope. So we speak about establishing the scope of a project quite often in our events, but not often do we get granular on the what and how of this process. So let's start by understanding the importance of this step. And for those who are relatively new to freelancing, you may not have felt the stress and anxiety which can accompany improperly scoped upfront projects. And you find yourself 2 months into a 1 week project with no exit plan in sight and a rather upset client blowing up your inbox. Scope creep is a very common occurrence in the freelancer world. The client asks you to code a widget so they can start signing people up for their services. What they didn't tell you, and perhaps you didn't ask, is that this needs to be mobile optimized. It needs to work for international contact information formats. And they also expect it to automatically email them a copy of the report every week. Oh, and it needs to connect via API to our Salesforce. You get the idea. What the client has in their mind does not always make it into the job posting. It's our responsibility to probe for this information and establish those key points and objectives up front, or you find yourself in uncomfortable situations. Now, setting client expectations is under the umbrella of good communication skills. You don't want your clients to be wondering, when are they going to get the next draft for review? Or how long is it going to take you to make those updates? Or what is the end result actually going to look like? So just as your time is valuable, it is literally the commodity we're selling at the end of the day, our time and skills. Just as your clients don't want their deliverables to miss that mark, you don't want to waste your time making those deliverables that are not going to end up in payments or a happy client. So by investing a small amount of intentional time up front, you eliminate a lot of wasted time aiming for a mark that is unclear. And oftentimes, properly scoping a project can unearth opportunities to upsell and provide additional services to your client, as I'd mentioned before. Perhaps this one project is part of a larger ongoing project. You won't know unless you ask, right? So on this event, we have a lot of different types of professionals from a diverse range of business verticals, but I aim to put together some questions which typically would apply to most folks. You will, of course, need to get more specific as it pertains to your specific flavor of work. But what services do you need? This sounds like a silly question, and perhaps I would phrase it slightly differently depending on the work that I'm doing. But as we discussed earlier, what the client wrote down and what they're expecting don't always line up. Perhaps I was hired to do a redesign of their website, but it turns out they're also needing SEO optimization, a branding refresh, and perhaps a few new content pieces and copy creation. It's important that I know this upfront, both to set expectations with the client and, if I need to, engage additional support if my skills don't include the client's full requirements. It's the beauty of having so many freelancers at your fingertips. If you find yourself in a project where it's got some skills slightly outside your expertise, go on Upwork, find someone to help you. Due dates and deadlines. I've said it once, I'll say it again a bunch more probably. You need to understand timelines and due dates. How long will it take them to review and provide feedback requests? Ask them. This answer will vary tremendously and will impact subsequent objective dates. So make sure you're baking in that turnaround time in your workflow. And be aware of any guidelines you need to reference. Sometimes it's a corporate style guide, other times it's compliance requirements. Take a moment to ask. Usually the clients will be quite giving of this information if you just pose the question. And deliverables, what end result do you need? Do they need to be editable? Do they need to be formatted for a specific use? Will I need to interface with a third party to help you implement or utilize these assets? In the graphic design world where I work, this oftentimes takes the form of, hey, I need you to design something for a trade show. And what they didn't mention is they also need me to connect with the printer and make sure it's formatted correctly. And each printer has their own specific needs. So it's important to be asking, how is this going to be used? Do you need me to sort of liaison with that connection point and help facilitate that next step? Or am I simply handing you the project? It varies. Another interesting question is, what prompted you to start this project? And again, you may want to rephrase this depending on your work vertical, but this general idea can often help clients elaborate on their real objectives, the root cause of why they're here hiring on Upwork. Maybe they said they wanted translation of some content from English to Spanish, but this came to the surface because they're moving into a new Spanish-speaking market and will actually need a reimagining of all their content, leading to a lot more work that you could be helping them complete. Similarly, it's important to gauge the goals of a project. Sometimes this is a simple, straightforward answer, and other times it will help provide some bigger picture context for you to better assist your client. When possible, personalize this question to the specific project. Simply asking, "What are your business goals?" is not usually going to result in a desired outcome. So take a moment to personalize these. Let's say, for instance, are you doing customer support coverage via email? Then perhaps this question would look more like, um, can you define or measure what successful customer support coverage metrics look like for your business? Are there specific metrics you're looking to improve upon, like satisfaction rating or the amount of touch points per closed case? Customize these questions to show that you understand the industry you're working in. It's not just a broad question. So this is far from being an exhaustive list on your scoping efforts, but it should give you a good starting point and help you frame out the nuances specific to your work. It helps a lot to put yourself in the shoes of the client, as does it for many freelancer processes. What details would you need to impart to someone if you were hiring them to do what you do? It's a good way of flipping the script and saying, well, I would need these ingredients, so I'd be asking these questions. So sort of reverse engineer your workflow there and find out what would you need to give the person. But these details are a good place to start. So we've talked about why scoping is important and what type of questions you could be utilizing. And I'd like to close out this little segment with some best practices when taking this important step. This first one should be no surprise. It's literally what we've been talking about. Make that project scope checklist. Don't just make it, use it. Try not to get drawn into granular details early on in the conversation during this process. It is easy to get blinders on and to walk down a detailed path before understanding the project from a high level. Know the context, identify the moving pieces, and then get into detail once the key aspects have been identified. And when working through these questions, make some bullet point notes of what you understand the specific goals and deliverables and timelines to be. Take that list of goals and deliverables that you took notes on and send it to the client. We want them to confirm if we have it correct and if it needs adjustment. This is the time to do it. Make sure this is confirmed in writing. I'm going to say that again. Make sure you confirm these in writing with the client. Oftentimes, these exploration calls are on a Zoom or a video call or whatever the case may be. And in that case, nothing's written down and it leaves some room for error. So even if I have a video calls, an interview or a scope establishing call, I'll take those notes, and afterwards in my message with them on the platform, I'll go ahead and say, Mr. or Mrs. Client, here's my understanding of the key points we need to do, the deadlines, the timelines, the expectation, and just bullet pointed out. And then I'll say at the end, does this look correct to you? Are there any aspects that I'm not considering? Give them the opportunity, and they say, nope, it's good to go. Cool, you've locked that in. And when 3 months down the line, they start adding to the list, you say, no problem. We're just going to expand the scope, and you go ahead and update it at that time. It's a good practice to ensure you know who the necessary approvers and contributors are to a project. If the person you're working with is doing this on behalf of a manager, perhaps it's prudent to include that manager in this approval step of the goals and objectives, or at least get their sign off on your understanding on the project scope. This process evolves as your business and clients grow, and it's a good idea to revisit and revise your checklist periodically to remain current. I know that it's changed a lot for me over my years of freelancing. In the beginning, it was a massive list that didn't always apply to my clients because I didn't really have a client profile. I wasn't really sure who my specific targets were. But now that I've been doing it for many years, I know who I'm going to be speaking to. I know what types of projects I get hired for, and I know what are the critical steps, what ingredients I need to ask for up front in order to be successful. And that takes time, but it also changes over time, as business tends to do. So our final segment today is touching on remaining organized while juggling multiple projects. A problem I wish for all of us on this call to experience is, man, I just have so many client projects to work on. These are the good problems. These are the ones where you know you're on the right track. Of course, we need to be mindful of not over-promising and under-delivering, but growing your business and handling multiple projects at once comes with some typical pitfalls and challenges it's important to be mindful of. I personally am more of a go with the flow and plan it as you go personality type. So the organizational steps and considerations we've been discussing here are not my organic state, and it takes me significant effort to develop and maintain, as I'm sure it does for many of us. So no matter if you're fresh on the freelancer scene or a seasoned veteran, these important building blocks are good to be reminded of periodically as we aim to stay competitive and on top of our game. I find it very easy to get blinders on when I'm working on a project. I typically have my sound canceling headphones on and my eyes glued to the screens. And it's super easy to lose most of an entire day on one project when really I need to be working on a whole bunch of projects that need to be progressing. As I mentioned before, being organized and scheduling can be a challenge, and this is made more complex when adding multiple projects to the list. Compound that with whatever your personal obligations may look like. I know many of us, if not all of us, are working from home. Maybe you got kids, maybe you got dogs, maybe you got friends visiting, whatever the case may be. So staying organized just gets vastly more complex. And I find that context shifting back and forth between projects frequently results in significant dead time as my brain is still chewing on the last topic while getting up to speed on the new topic. So I'm losing a lot of time there that could be better spent actually engaging in my project and focusing on one at a time. So with that in mind, I wanted to provide some solid suggestions to help keep you on track and feeling good about your workload. So block scheduling on your calendar is huge. It's a technique that if you aren't currently doing it, I highly recommend it. Sounds silly and simple, but it's super effective and has an added bonus of helping guard your personal time and obligations from being swallowed up by work. I know that I'm not the only one that's run into this issue where when you're freelancing and you're working from home, there's not really a start and end to your workday oftentimes. It's just work, work, work. And then you realize, oh, it's 8 o'clock at night. I've missed dinner with the family or whatever the case may be. So when I'm doing my block scheduling, I try and do this at the end of a week for the following week. I know what I need to get done predominantly, and I label large chunks of my days on my calendar as working only on a specific project. I schedule my lunch and any appointments with buffer time for travel and any chill time I need between times if I need. And I find myself daydreaming a lot less and being far more efficient with my time usage as I can see the block for this project is wrapping up in half an hour, as opposed to just an undefined mercurial endpoint like I am working on this project, end of sentence. That doesn't really give you a finite time where you can just sort of feel focused. I find that blocking off time really helps. There are so many useful and often free tools out there for managing projects and client workflow tracking. I mentioned Google Docs, great tools in there for free. There's also Asana, there's also Trello, and so many more. I like to start with the free tools, and then once I really know my business needs, then I'll consider paid system if I feel like I'm missing out on any specific features or functionality. But again, there's so many free tools out there that start with something simple is my suggestion. And let's be honest, there will be times when a deadline is going to need to push out. The dog ate something stupid and now you're at the vet all day, or the client had an emergency and really needs your attention. Whatever the case, this is human. This is fine. But it's a good idea to keep your clients in the loop, especially if timelines are adjusting on their projects. Even when we're on track, there should be a regular check-in point to let clients know this. They can't just pop their head over the cubicle wall and see that you're on track. You have to let them know. All right, folks. Before we dip into Q&A with our remaining time here, I'd like to provide you with a takeaway challenge to create your own polished onboarding workflow. What are some areas we discussed today that you can improve upon in your own onboarding workflow? Try referencing some past projects to really help identify friction points or topics to expand upon in future projects for clarity. And as always, think from the client perspective. Is your workflow sequential? Is it logical? Will they feel a sense of security knowing you're on top of this project? Would you, if you were in their position? It's a good way to look at it. I'll be posting a thread in the Upwork community forum once we close out this event in a little bit. Keep an eye out for that thread. I encourage you to continue the conversation and share your thoughts. What was your favorite part of the event? What questions did this bring up? What additional tips would you suggest to your peers starting this process? So let me see here if we can dip into the Q&A and answer some of these questions. Sorry again that chat feature wasn't working. We'll get that fixed up for the next one. All right, good question here. they're a top-rated freelancer with 100% JSS. Good job. Over the last 1.5 years, and has submitted good proposals and struggling to get views and responses from clients. This is a situation that comes up whether you're new or you're a veteran. It's more so when you're new. It's typically hard to get some things going there. There's a lot of considerations to keep in mind. I know in my work in the graphic design space, my clients are very cyclical. There are times of the year where they need a lot of work, and other times they don't need to talk to me at all. Typically, it coincides with like trade show seasons and things like that. But I've gotten to understand the ebbs and flows of when my clients are real busy and when they're not. And I try to use that downtime rather than banging my head against a wall. I'll use that to take a look at some of my processes, work on my business rather than in my business. And it's a good time to upskill. So while that doesn't change the acquisition of jobs, it is a productive use of time. And maybe it can help move you into a space where there's more clients that are actively working. But it sounds like you've got your processes dialed in well. It sounds like you've got good messaging. But as with anything, it's a good idea to review, update, and analyze the results of these periodically. So I've mentioned in a lot of my previous events, A/B testing. Maybe you're already familiar, maybe you're not. For those that aren't, with your proposals, a great way to get it dialed in, or if you feel like it's lost its mojo, like this user may feel that way, and it just needs to be refreshed, try A/B testing, which is where you have a framework of a proposal, not a copy and paste, never a copy and paste, but a general framework. I have 3 paragraphs for my proposal. Addressing the project. Yep, I got these skills. Here's why I'm best suited. A bit about me or the process, whatever the case may be. You make your framework, and you try 2 versions which are similar but slightly arranged differently, or slightly different information being highlighted. Send 10 with A, send 10 with B. If you get more results on B, okay, B is the new A, make a modified version, AB, AB, AB. You keep testing. And that's a good way to hone your messaging. Now, it sounds like you had messaging that worked real well, but it's never a bad exercise to revisit that topic and see if perhaps it just needs a little bit of a refresh. That's my best advice to you there. I hope that helps. Good question here about why are there fake job postings on the marketplace? This is a topic which Upwork takes very seriously, the scam postings. There's actually a variety of webinars I've done on the topic, I believe with Caitlin McNerney, our VP of Trust and Safety, if I'm not mistaken. If you look in the community events, in the past events, avoiding scam or identifying and avoiding scam on Upwork, I believe is the name of the event. This goes into great detail on what Upwork does to combat scam, what are the current scam methods that you should be aware of, and just sort of a high-level takeaway points. Excuse me. A fact that I found remarkably interesting is, as much as you may be seeing some scam postings on the platform, what we see that actually makes it through all the filters and security checkpoints is only about 10% of the scam that's trying to hit Upwork. Unfortunately, it's whenever there's a marketplace like this, it attracts unsavory characters with bad intentions. But the amount of safety protocols and reporting methods and tools we have in place are there for our protection. But I highly advise to everyone to attend these scam avoidance webinars. I'm trying to do one every year. I might even try and move that to multiple times a year, where we get updates on, hey, these are the new techniques. Because as soon as one technique gets squashed by our security systems, people are ingenious and they come up with a new method. And oftentimes these are very convincing. But some general high-level takeaways: payment never goes off the system. If they're saying, hey, I'll pay you through PayPal, Venmo, whatever, nope, hard pass. Communications need to stay on Upwork at least until you have a contract in place. I'd suggest even after that, just for security's sake. But if someone's saying, hey, talk to me on Skype, talk to me on Telegram before you've got a contract, say, nope, can't, it's against the terms of service. It's going to get me my account suspended. So let's keep it on platform. And if people are pushing back against that, they likely have malintent and you can just walk away. One last important point on this topic is that one of the best lines of defense is us as freelancers reporting these postings. Now, keep in mind that reporting a posting has no bad effect on you. Let's say that you saw a client posting, it looked suspicious, you clicked report, and it turns out it wasn't a scam. no one's harmed, no one gets dinged, your JSS isn't touched. So err on the side of caution and reporting those. We have entire groups of teams looking at all of those reports and handling these nonstop. So help us be part of the solution, and we do our best to try and maintain an environment of trust. It's a good point here. I have the impression that there are far more freelancers than clients. That's probably true. Probably depends on the work vertical you're in as well. Like I know in the coding and development software engineering space, there's a lot of demand. If you're wondering where to upskill, that's a good one. But there are more freelancers than clients, typically speaking. But I've also found that that does not mean you're in direct competition with all of these freelancers. I used to think that when I first started on the platform. I came from a tech startup background, and it's cutthroat. It's pretty gnarly. No one's your friend, generally speaking, or at least that was my experience. I thought the same would be true when I came onto Upwork and was first freelancing. I thought that don't share the secrets of success with anyone because this is my competition. But it turns out that there's clients for every type of independent professional. Not everyone's looking for the best, most expensive person in the category. Some people are looking for someone that's happy to be more part of the creative process, or handles things a certain way, or just communicates in a way that resonates with someone. So my best advice is, even though there are a lot of independent professionals that you are applying for that same job, be authentic, stand out, define your own value proposition. It's not just, hey, I'm good at the things you need. Here's why working with me is going to be easy. Here's what it's going to look like. Here's how easy your life is going to be. These are the types of things that make you stand out, and where people can really select to work with people that they're going to work well with. This is actually a topic that I get into detail on a lot of other events. Learning client selection. When I first started out, it was any job that came near me. Yes, I'll take it. I don't care who the client is, don't know what the project is. Yes, I'll do it. And I think many people fall into that trap in the beginning. It can lead to a lot of burnout. It can lead to a lot of bad reviews and disconnect. But the more advanced you get in your space, the more you start to understand your clients, the profile that you work with, and the environments you see yourself working in, the more you're able to determine upfront if this client is the right client for you. And so all that to say, don't feel discouraged if you're having trouble getting locked in with the right clients on a day-to-day basis. It's a process. It's a moving target, and that's why it's a good idea to have these onboarding processes and full workload processes lined out. Because once you've got a client and they have a fantastic experience with you, who do you think they're going to reach out to next time they got more work to do? And I think, by my measure at least, the sweet spot in my freelancing has been when 99% of my book of business is repeat customers. How to handle slow responding clients? Great question. So this can be challenging. And I think it helps to start off by looking at things from the client perspective. Let's say I run whatever business. I run a business, and I've come on Upwork to handle one little project on my laundry list of projects that I need to get done for my business. I come on Upwork and I say, hey, Will, I need you to do a logo for me. Great. I start doing the logo. I send him a review one, and silence. Silence for a week. Silence for 2 weeks. Now, this could mean that the client has just vaporized. More likely, it means that there's something on that laundry list of projects internally that client has that's more pressing, that's on fire, if you will. So keep in mind that typically the projects we're working on with clients are one piece of a much larger piece, which is their primary concern. So first up, try not to take it personal. It's usually not personal. And second, I would just, if the client is delaying and responding to you, set up a regular cadence, set up some reminders on your calendar to be like, hey, I'm going to ping this client, once a week for the next 3 weeks. And after that point, maybe I'll say, hey, maybe this is not the right time for us to be engaging. Perhaps your attention is needed elsewhere. I'm going to go ahead and put this contract on pause or close it out for now, whatever the case may be. And feel free to come back to me whenever you're ready, and put the ball in their court with maybe a monthly follow-up. But it does happen. It's typically not because they vaporize. It's just a matter of priorities typically. And so being polite and being conscientious. You don't want to badger them with an email every day, twice a day, saying, where's the update? Where do we stand? That's not going to make you any friends. But respectful follow-ups, and then I will typically have a suggestion along the lines of, hey, it looks like perhaps this is not the right time for you to be engaging in this process. Why don't we put it on ice and revisit it in a week, 2 weeks, whatever the case may be. So sorry you're experiencing that. It is frustrating when you're expecting to get a client project wrapped up in a week and suddenly it starts dragging on. What I would suggest is that if a client project has been dragging on and then they do re-engage with you at some point, this is a good time to bring back up the checklist, deadlines, and deliverables. Say like, hey, I get it. You're busy. Factoring in the fact that you're busy, why don't we amend our dates here and turnaround times so that we can be realistic, and we'll put some calendar invite reminders, whatever the case may be. There's a few ways to slice it. I hope that helps. So it's a good question here, Dennis. Thank you for posting it. And I believe we sort of touched on it during the event, but I'll circle back to it. They want to hear more about how to turn upsell opportunities into a repeatable process. I always get more work by pitching specific projects that they can help with. So going back to my closing out of a project, I do this with every single project, 100% of the time. My closeout process. I start with, let's just say it's a logo redesign. So we're talking apples to apples. I've done the logo, done the revisions. They're happy. They say, yep, we're feeling good. I say, all right, coming time to close out the project. I say, are you happy? Have I delivered everything that you needed for this? Do you have the file formats do you need? Do you need one that's web optimized? Do you need one for print? Do you have all the pieces you need? And I wait for that yes. If the answer is no, then I keep going back and saying, what do you need, until I get that yes. Once I got that yes, fantastic. Are there any other projects I can help you with? And being aware of the space I work in, if I've just redesigned a logo from someone, oftentimes they need to do a facelift on a lot of their other assets, like their flyers, their website, their business cards, things like that. I know because I work in this space. You're going to have your own version of this in whatever space you're working in. If you're coding, if you're working on this widget, what does it touch? What might also need updating? So keep in mind there. It also shows expertise in your area by knowing what projects your specific project sort of touches or is adjacent to. So I'll ask, is there anything I can help you out with? And I'll throw out a few specific examples if they come to mind. Like I mentioned, the website, business card, whatever the case may be. So I ask them, if they say, no, nothing at this time, I say, great, no problem. We're going to go ahead and close out the contract now. If you could please take 2 minutes to provide me with your feedback after we close out the project, this greatly assists me in finding other quality clients like you. And I'd appreciate it very much. I say that literally just flat to them. I already know that they're happy with me. I already know that they've got what they want and there's no more work for today. But that last closeout piece is important for getting those reviews. And we all know those reviews are important for getting the next client. So find your own way of phrasing that. But I find that triple prong approach to it results in a lot of 5-star reviews. If you take a look at mine, I'm nowhere near the top graphic designer. I don't mean to mislead there, but my reviews are good. My clients are happy and they say positive things. And it's because I use that workflow and make sure they are happy. So I hope that helps. But yeah, getting those repeat clients is the sweet spot for sure. It's a good question here about limiting the amount of proposals on a job is essentially the cliff notes of this question. And I want to touch on that because this measurement varies tremendously from industry to industry, just from people I've talked to. In my opinion, if I see a job, obviously in the graphic design space, so if I look at a project and there's 60 people that have already applied to this job and it's 2 days old, by my measurement, I might consider it a bit old or a bit stale, and perhaps I won't swing at it, send a proposal, unless I know I'm a perfect fit for it, like it matches my background. But then you see things in the software and mobile development side. They can have, 60 proposals sent. The project is 2 weeks old on the posting and it's still current. They're still looking for that right person. So it does vary immensely by work vertical and what skill level you're working at. But I would not shy away from applying to jobs just because 20 people beat you to the punch. That shouldn't stop you. If let me back up. I started working with Upwork or interacting with Upwork as a client before I ever freelanced, before I ever started doing these events. I was a client. I was hiring people. And so that experience of seeing what these proposals look like, the speed at which they fill up, the ones that are recommended, all the variables, it's a super important exercise. And I think it gives you a pretty good advantage on the freelancer side of knowing how best to position your value statement. You know where the proposal cuts off after a sentence and a half. So you need to make that first sentence and a half really stand out. I think little details like that have really helped me sort of dial in hard-hitting proposals that usually get people responding to them. And it wasn't that way at first. When I first started out, I was sending 20, 30 proposals a week, and I wasn't getting much traction. But I wasn't being very targeted and strategic in my approach. As I mentioned, I'm more of a fly by the seat of my pants kind of guy originally. But as you get more established in your processes, that definitely gets a lot better. Great question here, or observation. There's an increasing number of clients that offer ridiculously low and unjust rates. What do you suggest freelancers do? This is an interesting topic, and it may feel new to you, but this is, excuse me, it's been a topic since the beginning of freelancing, to my understanding. One of the main reasons for this is, again, this comes back to knowing the client experience on the platform. When a client is posting a job on Upwork, they have to put in a dollar amount for their budget. And as we've mentioned multiple times in this project, oftentimes the client doesn't really know what that should look like. They're not the expert in this space, hence why they're out here looking for one. So they might just put in a number just because they need to get to the next screen and hit go. So I don't let a client's budget, the funds that they put in on the posting, I don't let that determine what I'm going to write. Sometimes it's close and sometimes it's good, but let's say that the client said, "Yep, I looking for a logo redesign, or I'm looking for a deck creation, and it's got $100 for my budget." That's if you want a good deck, you're not paying $100 for it. So I know that that's too low. But instead of just passing by that job posting, I'll reach out to the client and do my proposal, but I will make sure and address the disparity between me charging $500 for this project and them having a $100 budget. And I'll address it. I'll say, I've worked in this space a long time. You can, of course, hire any sort of degree of talent, but I've taken a look at your website, or I see your assets, or I know this space, whatever the case may be. And for the quality that you're looking for, and for the seamless process, it's worth the investment. Here's why. Here's what I'm going to do. Here's what the process is going to look like. Take their hand and walk them down a path. I recommend to people a lot to try and get into that trusted advisor role. This is a good way of doing it. Keep in mind that the clients are not always as well versed on the environment, the system, how Upwork actually works, all these different things. And while Upwork is taking steps to help educate clients and make that a little bit more understood in the process, the onus still does sort of fall on us as a professional to help pick up some of that slack. But I find, rather than making that a burden and saying, "Oh, why do I have to teach the client how to, what's right and what works?" I think it's an opportunity. I think it's an opportunity to build trust, and for them to say, "Oh, I came on here not really knowing what I was doing, and Will took the time to explain it and make me understand how is it going to work. How does the fund release work? When does this happen? Why should I be paying X instead of Y?" This is a great opportunity to develop a lasting relationship with a client. So all that to say, don't pass up just because you see the budget is low. It may be an arbitrary number they threw out there. Ooh, good question. How do you showcase a project which you built for an old company or a previous employer, and you can't show to a client due to some NDA restrictions? This happened a lot to me. I worked in the cybersecurity space, so a lot of my design elements were for people in cybersecurity that real strict NDAs that keep things locked down tight, and justifiably so. In those situations, I would like if I design something really cool for a client, I would reach out to the client and say, "Hey, I'd like to be able to leverage this asset that we created for my portfolio, but I know that we signed an NDA, and I want to be respectful of your anonymity and your intellectual property." So one of the ways you can suggest that it goes is, "Hey, let me anonymize it, change the company name to Acme Inc., change names, stats, whatever, maybe change a color on it, whatever the different departments require different things, but find out their level of comfort being like, hey, if I'm able to set it apart from your actual company and make it not able to connect the two very easily, would you be comfortable with me sharing this? Sometimes yes, sometimes no. I've found that in my experience, oftentimes the NDA is more about sharing the nuts and bolts of how the company works and less about the shiny thing that you built. They don't want you giving away the inner workings, perhaps, that you were privy to while you were doing the project. But again, always err on the side of caution, always get it in writing. Don't just do it over the phone in case someone changes their mind. I hope that helps. All right, we got time for maybe one or two more questions here. I'll squeeze it in. When should a freelancer move towards an agency model? Fantastic question. And it's going to vary for each person. So unfortunately, I'm not going to give you a black and white answer here. But there's some things to consider. And I did some agency focused webinars earlier this year. If you look at the community events page, look at the past events, you'll see quite a few. One with Adam Palmer, Jennifer Statz recently I mentioned, very useful. But agency model is a fantastic way to scale up your business and to get to the point where the machine moves even when you stop looking at it. You know, as freelancers, you take a vacation, you don't bring your laptop, you're not getting paid. With an agency, you can maybe mitigate some of that by having the wheels continue turn while you're on vacation or doing something else. But keep in mind, creating an agency is a completely different beast than doing the work that you do. You may be a fantastic translator or coder or an accountant, whatever you do, but managing an agency and doing the sales and doing the sort of the accounting on that, you know, payroll and all that sort of thing, there's a lot to it, and it takes you out of doing a lot of the work that you've been doing. So the adjustment can be a bit of a shell shock. My suggestion is to engage with the community in the forums, in the different groups. If you haven't checked those out, check them out. There's a lot of people that have taken these steps that are happy to share their wisdoms and learnings and pitfalls to avoid. But that also includes markers of when did they decide that it was time to start an agency, and how did they go about doing it? What were the first steps? I really like some of the stuff that Jennifer Statz said in the recent event on how she figured out what to hire for. She used a method, you know, using sticky notes of the different jobs. It's great. Check it out. She did a really good job of defining it. All right, folks, we are coming to the end of our time here. I'm just going to put up one more slide and then sneak in one more question. So I'm going to take one more question, but as we close out this event, you should see on the little attendee hub where we're at now, when you leave this session, there will be a survey button there with a little thumbs up. If you wouldn't mind taking a few minutes to fill it out, just as client surveys help you do well at your job, they help me do well at my job too. It's my goal to create content which is useful and helpful to us in our journey. So that feedback means a lot. Ooh, sometimes client behavior is not good and they left bad feedback and you can't do anything. How do you reduce this process? Great question, Mohammed. A lot of what we talked about today, the transparency of these workflows and checklists, is to negate exactly this situation. Think about why a client is upset. Maybe they're just having a bad day. You never know. Maybe someone's just a disagreeable person. You've got to account for that. But oftentimes there's a reason for it. The reason maybe is they're unsure what's happening. They may feel like they're being taken advantage of because they put money down and then they don't know when to expect the deliverable. Whatever the case may be, that level of uncertainty and that lack of communication and transparency generally leads to miscommunication and points of friction. So this will help. The stuff we discussed today will help mitigate a lot of that from happening. But if you find yourself in that situation, this is a big part of why it's so important to keep communications on Upwork, because then you can reach out to Upwork support and mediation services, and they'll get involved. And let's say they determine that the client is being unreasonable, or perhaps, you know, the onus doesn't fall on you. We'll just say, if that's the case, they can go ahead and help wipe out that review. There's also a feature, I don't know if you're aware of this, but on the Freelancer Plus membership, the Upwork Freelancer Plus membership, that gives you the ability once every 3 months to request removal of a feedback item. Now, this is great if you've got one disagreeable client who left you a nasty gram review and low stars. Obviously, wipe that out. But another thing to consider, another way to use it that actually a freelancer on one of the events brought up that they use is, let's say you started out charging not much for what you do. And since then, you've grown tremendously. You were billing $10 an hour. Now you're billing $60 an hour. once you've got enough projects in your catalog that you can lean against, it might be a good idea to remove some of those lower paying jobs so that people aren't questioning, why are you charging me $500 when you did this 2 years ago for $20? So it's useful. I found that helpful. The Freelancer Plus membership does have a few really cool features to it. And I look forward to catching you guys next time. Hopefully the chat will be up and running and we'll figure out this picture in a better spot too. I appreciate your patience as we hosted this first event in our new program here. So thank you so much. Have a great rest of the day. Again, fill out that survey if you've got a moment, and I look forward to catching you next time. Bye-bye.